My name is Jordan, and if someone had told me a year ago that the most embarrassing booking mistake of my life would completely change everything I thought I knew about my best friend, I would have laughed. Because Blake and I had been friends for almost 4 years. Real friends. The kind who could spend 12 hours in a car arguing about music, split a pizza without asking who owed who, and somehow turn the smallest inconvenience into a story we'd keep retelling for months. We met during our sophomore year of college when my laptop died 5 minutes before a presentation, and Blake silently slid his over to me without even asking if I'd give it back. That was him. Quiet when everyone else was loud. Reliable without making a big deal out of it. He wasn't the type who filled every silence. He was the type who made silence comfortable. By the time we both graduated, we were sharing an apartment to save money while figuring out what came next. I worked remotely for a small marketing company. Blake had landed an engineering job that somehow involved spreadsheets, construction sites, and phone calls that always sounded stressful. We were 24 now. Still roommates. Still best friends. Still completely convinced we knew everything about each other. Turns out we didn't. It started with a stupid idea. "You know what we need?" Blake said one Friday evening while dropping onto the couch beside me. I muted the movie we'd already spent 20 minutes ignoring. $1 million? Close. A new coffee machine? Closer. He grinned. A vacation. I stared at him. You? I'm serious. You voluntarily want to leave your apartment? I know. Shocking. I laughed. Blake was a homebody. If given the choice between hiking through mountains or sitting on our balcony drinking coffee, he'd choose the balcony every single time. So what changed? He shrugged. I've been working nonstop for 8 months. True. You've been complaining about burnout. Also true. We have saved enough. Still true. So? I leaned back. So where? He pulled out his phone. I've been looking. You've already been looking? For weeks. You planned this without telling me? I wanted to make sure you'd actually have vacation days. You sneaky. He smiled without denying it. I found this little mountain resort. He handed me the phone. The place looked incredible. Wooden cabins. Lake nearby. Hiking trails. Huge windows overlooking pine forests. It looked peaceful in exactly the way both of us desperately needed. This is nice. Right. Not crazy expensive either. I checked. You really planned this. I was hoping you'd say yes. I already am. He smiled again. It wasn't unusual for us to travel together. We'd taken weekend road trips before. Gone camping once, which ended with Blake accidentally setting off the campground's emergency alarm trying to cook breakfast. I still reminded him every chance I got. I maintained that toaster was defective. It was a camp stove. It had issues. You set it on fire. It was enthusiastic. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped his phone. Book it. Seriously? Yeah. He didn't need more encouragement. Within minutes he had his laptop open. Dates. Cabin options. Parking. Breakfast included. The whole thing. Meanwhile, I made coffee and watched him concentrate with that familiar little crease between his eyebrows. Blake always looked adorable when he focused. Not that I ever called him adorable. Mostly because he'd probably throw a pillow at me. So, he muttered. What? There are only 3 rooms left. Okay. Standard. Lakeview? Sounds expensive. It is. And? He hesitated. Then there's this one. He turned the laptop toward me. Honeymoon suite. I blinked. Then burst out laughing. Oh, absolutely. It actually costs less than the Lakeview. Why? I have no idea. I looked closer. Huge room. Fireplace. Balcony. Jacuzzi. King bed. I frowned. Wait. Yeah. 1 bed. Yep. Silence. Then simultaneously. No. We both laughed. I'll take the floor. No chance. I'll bring an air mattress. You'll hate it. I always hate it. He refreshed the page. Let's just keep looking. 10 minutes later. Nothing. Everything else was sold out. The standard room disappeared while we were debating. Blake sighed dramatically. Well. He looked at me. I mean. No. It is technically cheaper. Blake. We're adults. Blake. We survived sharing a tent. That was different. You stole all the blankets. You snore. I absolutely do not. You absolutely do. I breathe confidently. He laughed. You sound like a lawn mower. Rude. He leaned back. We don't have to. I stared at the screen. Honestly, it didn't seem like that big a deal. We'd accidentally fallen asleep watching movies before. During long road trips, one of us usually ended up leaning against the other. Neither of us had ever made it weird. How big is the bed? He checked. Very. Like actually? California King? Huh. Yeah. Another pause. I mean, you were literally just making fun of it. I know. But we're saving like $300. You are unbelievably cheap. I prefer financially responsible. You bought a gaming keyboard with lights. Necessary investment. You don't even play competitive games. It changes colors. I rest my case. He rubbed the back of his neck. We can cancel if it feels weird. I looked at him. My best friend. The guy I'd trusted with literally everything. The one person who'd never judged me. Never let me down. Never made anything uncomfortable. Fine. His eyes widened. Really? One condition. Name it. If you steal the blankets. I won't. I get to tell everyone you booked us the honeymoon room. He groaned. I knew there'd be blackmail. Oh, absolutely. You are impossible. And yet you invited me. I question my decisions daily. He clicked book now. Filled everything out. Entered his card. Confirmed. Then froze. Jordan? What? He slowly turned the laptop toward me again. At the top of the confirmation email, in giant elegant letters, it read, Congratulations on your honeymoon escape. Below that, complimentary champagne upon arrival. Romantic welcome package included. Couples spa discount available. Either of us spoke. Then Blake covered his face with both hands. Oh no. I completely lost it. I laughed so hard I actually slid off the couch onto the floor. This is going to be incredible. I hate you. No, you don't. I absolutely do. I'm framing that confirmation email. You are never showing anyone. Oh, I'm absolutely showing everyone. He pointed dramatically at me. If you tell Emma. I'm telling Emma first. My own sister will never let me live this down. Neither will I. He sighed. We're going to regret this. I couldn't stop smiling. Somehow. I didn't think the booking mistake would end up being the most memorable part of the trip. I had absolutely no idea how wrong I was. The drive to the resort took a little over 5 hours. Which meant 5 hours of Blake insisting we needed a carefully curated road trip playlist. And me replacing half his songs with terrible early 2000s pop just to annoy him. You did that on purpose. I have no idea what you're talking about. This wasn't here yesterday. It's called musical diversity. It is called emotional damage. I laughed as another ridiculously dramatic love song started playing through the speakers. Blake shot me a look. You are unbelievable. You booked the honeymoon suite. You agreed. I agreed because you're persuasive. You agreed because you're cheap. That's also true. The conversation drifted after that. Like it always did. We talked about work. About college friends. About whether we should finally replace the old couch back home. About absolutely nothing important. It was easy. Everything with Blake usually was. Around lunchtime, we stopped at a small roadside diner. Nothing fancy. Just burgers, fries, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. While we waited for our food, Blake leaned back in the booth. You know. What? I'm actually glad we're doing this. You sound surprised. I kind of am. Why? He looked out the window for a moment. I've been saying yes to work for so long that I forgot I can say yes to other things. That wasn't like Blake. Normally he joked whenever conversations became even remotely serious. Today he didn't. You've been exhausted. I know. You needed this. I think we both did. I nodded. He wasn't wrong. The last year had been one deadline after another. Same apartment. Same routines. Same conversations. Same grocery store every Sunday. Somewhere along the way we'd stopped doing things simply because they were fun. Maybe this trip really was overdue. Back on the road, Blake eventually reached into the back seat. Oh. What? I forgot. He handed me a small paper bag. What's this? Open it. Inside was a ridiculous pair of matching sunglasses. Mine had blue frames. His were green. I stared at him. Seriously? They were on sale. You bought matching vacation sunglasses. I bought practical eye protection. They literally say Adventure Squad on the side. They were discounted. I couldn't stop smiling. You're such a dork. Takes one to know one. We wore them anyway. Naturally. About an hour later, Emma called. Blake glanced at the screen. Oh no. What? Don't. I'm answering. He sighed. You're evil. He put the call on speaker. Hey. Emma's cheerful voice filled the car. So. Vacation. Yep. You finally escaped adulthood. For 3 days. Worth it. Then. So where are you staying? I looked at Blake. He looked at me. I smiled. Blake immediately knew. No. Emma heard him. No what? I answered before he could. We accidentally booked the honeymoon suite. Silence. Exactly 2 seconds. Then hysterical laughter exploded through the speakers. I'm sorry, what? Blake closed his eyes. I hate both of you. Emma could barely breathe. You too? It was the only room left. Oh my God! It's not funny. It is literally the funniest thing you've ever told me. Jordan, that was me, couldn't resist. They're giving us complimentary champagne. Emma made a sound somewhere between laughing and choking. I am never letting this go. I know. I need pictures. No. Please. No. Just one. No. The decorative towels shaped like swans. Absolutely not. I nearly dropped my phone laughing. Emma finally calmed down enough to breathe. I love you both. We know. But seriously. Her voice softened. Have fun. We will. You both deserve a break. That simple sentence lingered long after the call ended. Blake quietly focused on the road. You okay? Yeah. You got quiet. He shrugged. She worries. So do I. He glanced over. I know. It wasn't dramatic. Just honest. Another hour passed. Mountains slowly replaced highways. Tall pines lined the roads. The air somehow looked cleaner. Everything slowed down. When we finally pulled into the resort entrance, even Blake let out a low whistle. Wow! The place looked even better than the pictures. Small wooden lodges scattered around a lake. Stone paths. Flower gardens. Huge trees everywhere. It felt peaceful. Like the world outside simply didn't exist anymore. We grabbed our bags and walked into reception. The lobby smelled like cedar wood and fresh coffee. A woman behind the desk smiled warmly. Welcome. Blake stepped forward. Reservation for Blake Carter. She typed for a few seconds, then smiled wider. Oh. Blake immediately looked nervous. Oh? Congratulations. I bit my lip. Blake froze. The receptionist reached under the desk. She placed a beautifully wrapped basket in front of us. Champagne. Chocolate. Candles. A card. Blake stared. I stared. The receptionist beamed. "We hope your honeymoon will be unforgettable." Silence. Complete silence. Blake opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "We're actually—" I interrupted before he could. "Thank you?" He looked at me in horror. The receptionist handed us 2 room keys. "Our staff has already prepared everything." Prepared everything. That sentence sounded far more dangerous than it probably was. As we walked toward the elevator, Blake whispered, "Why didn't you correct her?" I shrugged. "Free chocolate. Jordan. Free champagne. Jordan. We're never seeing these people again." He stared at me. "You're enjoying this so much. I've created a monster. You created it the moment you clicked book now." The elevator doors opened. 3rd floor. Room 312. Blake slid the keycard into the lock. The door clicked open. We walked inside. Both of us stopped immediately. Oh! The room was enormous. Far bigger than either of us expected. A fireplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Fresh flowers. Soft lighting. A massive balcony. And the bed. It was ridiculous. Huge. Covered with white blankets. Decorated with folded towels shaped into 2 swans whose necks formed a heart. In the center. Rose petals. Blake slowly covered his face. "I cannot believe this." I walked over to the little welcome card. It read, "To Blake and Jordan. May your love story begin with unforgettable memories." I looked at Blake. He looked at me. Either of us spoke. Then, somehow, we both burst into laughter at exactly the same moment. Not polite laughter. The kind where your stomach hurts. Where you can't breathe. Where every time you calm down, you notice another absurd detail and start all over again. When we finally recovered, Blake picked up one of the decorative rose petals. "Do you think housekeeping spent an hour making this?" "Probably." "I feel terrible." "You feel guilty because strangers think we're romantic." "I feel guilty because they worked hard." I smiled. "You really are too nice." He shrugged awkwardly. "I just don't like wasting people's effort." There was something about that answer. Simple. Completely sincere. Very Blake. I looked around the room again. For the first time, I noticed there wasn't actually anything uncomfortable about being here. It was just us. Exactly like always. Only somewhere much prettier. Neither of us realized that before the day was over. The room would stop feeling like a joke. And start feeling strangely natural. The first hour in the room was spent doing one thing. Laughing. Not constantly. But every few minutes one of us noticed another ridiculous detail. Matching bathrobes embroidered with Mr. and Mr. A tiny booklet titled Romantic Experiences for Two. A heart-shaped box filled with chocolates. Even the television welcomed us with "Happy honeymoon, Blake and Jordan." Blake stared at the screen. "I'm afraid to touch anything." "Why?" "What if they send someone to congratulate us in person?" I nearly choked laughing. "You've created an entire scenario. It feels possible. It really does." He sighed dramatically. "I should have booked literally anywhere else." "You tried." "I should have tried harder." "You wanted to save $300. "I did." "You are suffering the consequences." He threw one of the decorative pillows at me. "You're impossible. You keep saying that. Because you keep proving it." Eventually we unpacked. Blake claimed the left side of the closet. I took the right. Completely automatically. The kind of routine 2 longtime roommates don't even think about anymore. Neither of us noticed how strangely domestic it looked until Blake suddenly laughed. "What?" He pointed. "We've already divided closet space." "So?" He smiled. "We've lived together too long." "Probably." You folded my sweaters. You fold yours terribly. I do not. You absolutely do. They're efficient. They're wrinkles waiting to happen. I respect creative geometry. You disrespect fabric. He grinned. There he is. What? My judgmental roommate. You missed him? A little. That sentence was strangely warm. Like he genuinely had. The afternoon passed exploring the resort. There were walking trails surrounding the lake. Small wooden bridges. Little cafes. People everywhere looked unbelievably relaxed. Several couples wandered hand in hand. One older couple smiled as we walked past. You boys picked the perfect weather. Blake smiled politely. We really did. The man nodded toward us. Honeymoon? Blake froze for maybe half a second. I answered before he could. Long story. The older woman laughed. They're always the best ones. As soon as we walked away, Blake looked at me. You keep letting people believe it. I haven't technically lied. You absolutely have. I said it was a long story. It is not. It became one. He rolled his eyes. I'm starting to understand why people believe everything you say. You think I'm charming. I think you're dangerous. I'll accept that. We reached the lake. Crystal clear water. Small dock. Kayaks tied nearby. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence wasn't awkward. Just peaceful. Finally, Blake sat on the edge of the dock. I sat beside him. Our shoulders almost touched. You know. What? I haven't stopped thinking about work once. I looked over. Really? He nodded. I usually can't switch my brain off. But today. He looked across the water. Nothing. I smiled. That's probably a good sign. It feels weird. In a bad way? No. He smiled faintly. In a healthy way. We stayed there another 20 minutes. Watching ducks. Listening to the water. Doing absolutely nothing. It felt surprisingly nice. Back at the lodge, there was a notice under our door. Complimentary couples wine tasting. 6:30 p.m. Blake picked it up. Jordan. What? I think they're committed. Oh, we're absolutely going. He looked horrified. No. Free wine. They'll ask questions. We'll answer them. They'll ask how we met. We'll tell the truth. They'll ask how long we've been together. I thought for a second. 4 years. His jaw dropped. That is not the truth. We've known each other for years. They won't mean friendship. I never said they would. He stared at me. You are an agent of chaos. I've accepted that. 5 minutes later. We were somehow walking toward the tasting room. Blake muttered under his breath the entire way. I still think this is a mistake. It became a mistake 3 weeks ago. I could still turn around. You won't. Probably not. The room was cozy. Fireplace. Soft music. About 10 couples sitting around small wooden tables. The host welcomed everyone. So wonderful to have all of you celebrating love with us. Blake inhaled very slowly. I was trying not to laugh. The tasting itself was actually fun. Different local wines. Cheese. Stories about the nearby vineyards. Everyone chatted casually. Eventually the host reached our table. So, he smiled warmly. Who proposed? Blake looked at me. I looked at Blake. Neither of us answered immediately. Then Blake said, the booking website. I nearly spit out my wine. The host blinked. I'm sorry? Blake smiled politely. It was very persuasive. I completely lost it. The host laughed too, assuming it was some inside joke. I love that. Blake whispered as the man walked away. I panicked. I know. I'm so embarrassed. You were adorable. He looked at me. Adorable? I immediately regretted the word. He blinked once. Then smiled. I'll remember that. You shouldn't. I definitely will. Something about the way he smiled lingered in my head much longer than it should have. Dinner afterward was surprisingly quiet. Not awkward. Just comfortable. Blake seemed unusually thoughtful. You okay? You've been quiet. He nodded. Just thinking. Dangerous. A little. What about? He stirred his drink for a second. When was the last time we actually spent time together like this? I frowned. What do you mean? I mean. He searched for the words. Without distractions. No work. No apartment chores. No deadlines. No phones. I thought about it. College? Probably. That realization sat between us. Somehow we'd spent years living together, yet had quietly stopped making time for each other. Life had simply happened, one routine replacing another, until friendship became something that existed in the background instead of something we actively enjoyed. Blake looked out the restaurant window. I kind of miss this, I answered honestly. Me too. He smiled. Small. Genuine. The kind of smile he only showed people he completely trusted. For reasons I couldn't explain. My chest felt unexpectedly warm. On the walk back to our room, the evening air had turned cool. Without thinking, Blake slowed his pace until we were walking side by side. Not close enough to touch. Just comfortably together. The lights around the lake reflected across the water. Everything was quiet. Peaceful. When we reached our room, Blake opened the door. Immediately stopped. Jordan. What? He pointed inside. Housekeeping had been there. The rose petals were gone. Instead, candles had been arranged around the fireplace. Soft lights glowed across the room. Fresh towels. The curtains partly closed. And sitting in the middle of the bed, a handwritten note. Enjoy your romantic evening. Blake stared. I stared. Then both of us started laughing again. I swear, Blake said between laughs, they're more invested in this relationship than we are. I looked at him. At the exact moment he realized what he'd said. He froze. That came out wrong. I smiled. It kind of did. For the first time all day. Instead of immediately laughing it off, Blake looked away. Just for a second. And somehow, that tiny moment felt much louder than any joke we'd shared since arriving. I expected things to feel awkward after that. They didn't. Which somehow made everything even stranger. Blake disappeared into the bathroom to shower first, leaving me alone in the room. I sat on the balcony with one of the complimentary bottles of sparkling water, watching the lake disappear into the evening darkness. My brain kept replaying one tiny moment. They're more invested in this relationship than we are. It had clearly been a joke. So why had he looked embarrassed afterward? Maybe because the wording sounded weird. Maybe because we'd spent an entire day pretending to be something we weren't. Maybe I was reading too much into it. That was probably it. When Blake came back out, his hair was still damp. He'd traded his jeans for gray sweatpants and an oversized sweatshirt. Comfortable. Relaxed? Very. Blake. Your turn. I grabbed my clothes. Don't eat all the chocolates. I make no promises. 20 minutes later I returned to find exactly what I'd expected. Half the chocolates were gone. You traitor. I was protecting you. From chocolate? Too much sugar before bed. You're unbelievable. I learned from the best. He tossed one remaining chocolate toward me. I caught it. Thanks. You looked disappointed. I was. I know. We settled onto opposite ends of the couch. Movie playing. Fireplace crackling. Neither of us paying much attention. About halfway through, Blake muted the TV. I have a question. Okay. Be honest. Always. He hesitated. Has today been weird? I considered it. Funny weird? I guess. I don't know. I leaned back. I thought it'd be uncomfortable. And? It wasn't. He nodded slowly. Same. Silence. I kept expecting it to become awkward. It never really did. No. He rubbed the back of his neck. I don't know why. Maybe because we've known each other forever. Maybe. Another quiet moment. Then he smiled. I did enjoy watching you nearly choke during the wine tasting. I enjoyed watching you tell strangers our relationship started because of a booking website. Fair. We laughed again. The conversation drifted naturally after that. Old college stories. Terrible professors. Embarrassing first jobs. The apartment. Friends. Eventually Blake stretched and yawned. I'm exhausted. Same. Then, both of us looked toward the bed. The enormous, ridiculously comfortable-looking bed. At exactly the same time. Oh. Blake laughed awkwardly. I forgot. So did I. Right. He scratched the side of his neck. I can still ask for blankets. Blake. What? It's a bed. I know. We're adults. I know. We've literally fallen asleep on the same couch before. I know. So why are you suddenly acting nervous? He blinked. Am I? Kind of. He looked genuinely surprised. I didn't realize. That answer caught me off guard. Because it sounded honest. Not defensive. Just confused. He sat down on one side of the bed. Testing the mattress. This thing is enormous. I sat on the opposite side. There was enough space between us for another person. Maybe two. See? I said. We're practically in different zip codes. That made him laugh. True. The lights went off a few minutes later. The room settled into darkness. Only moonlight spilled through the curtains. For a while either of us spoke. Then. Jordan? Yeah? You awake? Obviously. Right. Silence again. Then. I forgot to tell you something. What? My mom texted. Oh? I told her we arrived safely. Good. I accidentally sent her a picture. Of what? He groaned. The room. I turned my head toward him. Blake. I know. Please tell me you explained. I tried. Tried? She replied before I could. What did she say? He buried his face in the pillow. That's beautiful. I'm so happy for both of you. I covered my face. No. Yes. No. I panicked. What did you answer? Nothing. I laughed so hard the mattress shook. You left her thinking. I know. Oh my God! I'll fix it tomorrow. You absolutely have to. I know. We both kept laughing. Eventually it faded. The room became quiet again. Peaceful. Comfortable. Then Blake spoke. Much softer this time. Thanks. For what? For coming on this trip. I smiled into the darkness. You invited me. I know. But. He searched for words. I forgot how much I needed to just exist for a few days. I get that. I don't think I would have come alone. You definitely wouldn't. No. Another pause. I'm glad you're here. Something about the sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Me too. Neither of us said anything after that. The silence wasn't empty. It felt full. Sometime during the night I woke briefly. Not fully. Just enough to notice the room was colder. I reached instinctively toward the blanket. Half asleep. Pulled it higher. Then realized it wasn't moving. I opened my eyes. Blake had somehow managed to wrap almost the entire blanket around himself. I stared at him. Seriously? He was completely asleep. Oblivious. I quietly tugged. Nothing. Tugged harder. Still nothing. The man had the grip strength of someone defending national secrets. Blake. No response. Blake. A sleepy mumble. You're stealing the blanket. He opened one eye. Looked down. Oh. Then immediately tried fixing it. Only to somehow make it worse. Now both of us were tangled. I started laughing. So much for not stealing it. I sincerely apologize. You lied to me. I underestimated unconscious Blake. I'll be filing a complaint. He smiled sleepily. I'll accept responsibility. Working together, we finally untangled the blanket. By then we were both awake enough to notice something. We were laughing. At 3:30 in the morning. Over a blanket. Exactly the way we would have laughed back at our apartment. Nothing about this felt different. Or forced. Or strange. Just us. Eventually we settled again. This time making sure each of us had enough blanket. Better? Blake asked quietly. Much. Good. A minute later he murmured. I'm still going to blame the bed. You should blame yourself. I refuse. You have no honor. I have warmth. I smiled into the darkness. Good night, blanket thief. Good night. Within minutes his breathing slowed again. Mine followed not long after. Neither of us realized that by morning, something small had changed. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough that once we noticed it, neither of us would quite know what to do with it. I woke up first. Which almost never happened. Blake usually beat me out of bed by at least half an hour, already halfway through making coffee before I opened my eyes. This time, something felt different. It took me a second to realize what it was. The blanket. It wasn't tangled anymore. Somehow, during the night, we both ended up sleeping comfortably. I smiled to myself. Small victory. Then I noticed Blake was already awake. He was lying on his back, staring at the wooden ceiling. You've been awake long? He turned his head. Maybe 10 minutes. Couldn't sleep? Nah. You okay? He nodded. Just listening. To what? The birds. I laughed softly. You've officially entered vacation mode. I think so. Neither of us moved immediately. There was no rush. No alarm. No meetings waiting. No emails demanding attention. Eventually Blake stretched. I vote coffee. I second that. The resort delivered breakfast to the room. Fresh pastries. Fruit. Coffee. Orange juice. Everything arranged neatly on a wooden tray. The employee smiled warmly. Good morning. Morning. We hope you both slept well. Blake answered before I could. Eventually. The employee laughed. The first night in a new place can be difficult. Blake glanced at me. You have no idea. As soon as the door closed, I looked at him. You almost told him about the blanket. I almost did. You absolutely almost did. It felt important. It was. We carried breakfast onto the balcony. Morning sunlight covered the lake. Mist floated just above the water. It looked unreal. For a while we simply ate in comfortable silence. Then Blake suddenly asked, Can I ask you something weird? Depends. Serious answer. Okay. He looked down at his coffee. Have we always spent this much time together? I blinked. What do you mean? I mean. He frowned slightly. We've lived together for over a year. Yeah. But I don't think I've actually looked at our routines before. I waited. We eat dinner together most nights. Usually. We grocery shop together. Because it's easier. We watch movies. We travel. Apparently. He smiled faintly. We basically built a life without ever talking about it. That sentence lingered. Because. He wasn't wrong. Somewhere between moving in together and everyday routines, we'd quietly become each other's default person. Need groceries? Call Jordan. Something funny happened? Tell Blake. Bad day? The other one usually noticed before anyone else. I'd never really thought about it. Maybe because it had happened so gradually. Blake looked almost amused by the realization. When did that happen? I honestly don't know. He nodded slowly. Me either. The rest of the morning disappeared into hiking trails. The resort had dozens of them. Some easy. Some ridiculously steep. Naturally, Blake insisted we try the difficult one. You hate exercise. I like views. There's a difference. I've been manipulated. You volunteered. Halfway up the trail he stopped. I regret everything. I folded my arms. Interesting. My legs are filing complaints. You mocked me yesterday. I was young. It was yesterday. I've matured. You've suffered. Same thing. I laughed. Eventually we reached the overlook. It was worth every step. Mountains stretched forever. The lake shimmered below. Tiny cabins looked like toys from up there. Blake slowly turned in a circle. Wow. No jokes. No sarcasm. Just genuine amazement. I've never seen anything like this. Neither had I. We stayed there a long time. Taking pictures. Talking. Mostly just enjoying the quiet. At one point Blake held up his phone. Come here. For what? Picture. We've taken like 20. Not together. I hesitated. True. He extended his arm. I stepped beside him. Our shoulders bumped naturally. Click. He checked the photo. What? We actually look. He stopped himself. Happy. I looked at the screen. He was right. No forced smiles. No posing. Just two friends laughing because the wind had nearly blown his hair into my face right before the picture. It felt real. I like this one. Me too. He saved it immediately. Back at the resort that afternoon, we decided to rent kayaks. The employee handed us life jackets. Couples usually enjoy paddling to the little island. Blake didn't even react anymore. He simply accepted the life jackets. I leaned closer. You're adapting. I've entered the acceptance stage. Proud of you. I'm emotionally exhausted. Out on the water, things started peacefully. For approximately 6 minutes. Then Blake accidentally splashed me. I didn't mean to. Liar. I genuinely didn't. I splashed him back. Oh. So that's how today is. You started it. I absolutely did not. 5 minutes later, we were both laughing too hard to paddle properly. An older couple floated past us. The woman smiled knowingly. You boys look like you're having fun. We are, Blake answered. And somehow, for the first time all weekend, neither of us felt the need to explain anything. Not because we were pretending. Simply because it didn't matter. They were strangers. We were two people enjoying a vacation. That was enough. Later, sitting on the tiny island dock, Blake skipped a small stone across the lake. I forgot what this feels like. What? Being present. I looked at him. He rarely admitted things like that. I've spent months thinking about next week. He tossed another stone. Or tomorrow. Or work. Exactly. And now? He smiled. I'm thinking about today. I nodded. That's progress. He looked over. Thanks. For reminding me life exists outside my laptop. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. Then he added quietly. Maybe not. That sentence stayed with me all the way back to the resort. That evening there was a small outdoor concert by the lake. Nothing elaborate. Just an acoustic guitarist. String lights. People sitting on blankets across the grass. We found 2 empty chairs near the back. Music drifted across the water. The atmosphere felt unbelievably peaceful. At one point Blake leaned closer so I could hear him. I'm glad we came. I smiled. I know. No. He shook his head. I mean. He searched for the right words again. I'm glad I came with you. For just a second. The noise around us seemed to fade. Not because he'd said anything extraordinary. but because of the way he'd said it. Completely sincere. Like it genuinely mattered. I answered quietly. Me too. Neither of us noticed the photographer wandering between the audience, taking candid pictures, until she stopped beside us. You two look great together. Click. The camera flashed. We'll have prints available tomorrow morning. Before either of us could respond, she was already walking away. Blake looked at me. I looked back. Then we both laughed. I swear, he said, this entire resort has decided we're the main characters. I smiled. Maybe we are. He laughed again. But this time, for just a heartbeat. He held my gaze a little longer than usual. Long enough for me to notice. Long enough to wonder if he noticed too. Neither of us looked away immediately. And neither of us seemed to know why. I blamed the mountain air. That had to be it. Fresh air. No work. No stress. Because there was absolutely no other explanation for why I suddenly became so aware of Blake. Not in some dramatic, life-changing way. Just little things. The way he smiled before he laughed. The tiny crease between his eyebrows whenever he concentrated. How he always thanked every employee we met, no matter how small the interaction. I'd known all of those things for years. So why did they suddenly stand out? The next morning started with a knock at our door. Blake opened it. The receptionist smiled brightly. Good morning. Morning. I have something for you. She handed him a small envelope. He looked confused. Thank you? As soon as the door closed, he opened it. Inside was the photograph from the concert. The one the photographer had taken. Neither of us spoke for a second. It was surprisingly good. Neither of us had been looking at the camera. We'd been looking at each other. Both smiling. String lights reflected behind us. The lake shimmered in the background. It looked natural. Like the picture had captured a moment neither of us realized existed. Blake quietly handed it to me. That's nice. It is. He rubbed the back of his neck. We should keep it. I was thinking the same. You can have it. No. You found it. So? You keep it. He shook his head. We'll put it on the fridge. I laughed. People are going to ask questions. They already ask why we own 3 coffee makers. Fair. We left the photo carefully inside the envelope. Neither of us mentioned that we'd both looked at it a little longer than necessary. After breakfast we rented bicycles. The trails circled the entire lake. Easy ride. Perfect weather. About halfway around, Blake suddenly stopped. What? I forgot my wallet. You don't need it. I know. But I forgot it. I stared. You stopped because you remembered something we don't need? I like remembering things. You're impossible. There it is again. What? You keep saying that. You keep earning it. He laughed. I missed hearing that. I frowned. You've heard it your entire life. I know. But... He looked toward the lake. It feels different here. I wasn't sure what he meant. So I asked. Different how? He thought for a moment. I don't know. Then he smiled awkwardly. Maybe because we're actually talking. We always talk. No. He shook his head. We exchange information. The distinction surprised me. I tell you about meetings. You tell me about clients. We complain about grocery prices. We argue about movies. He nodded. But we haven't really asked each other questions in a long time. I realized he was right. Real questions. Not practical ones. Not routine ones. The kind that didn't have to be asked. Until suddenly they did. So, I said. What? Ask me something. He smiled. Anything? Anything. He looked genuinely thoughtful. Then, when was the last time you were actually happy? The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer immediately. Because I honestly didn't know. Finally I said, Maybe college. Blake looked surprised. Really? I think so. What about after? I shrugged. Life happened. He nodded slowly. I guess it did. What about you? He didn't hesitate. Right now. I looked at him. He wasn't joking. I'm serious. I know. I haven't felt this relaxed in. He laughed quietly. I don't even know. Something inside me softened. I'm glad. He smiled. Me too. That afternoon it started raining. Not heavily. Just enough that everyone retreated indoors. The resort lounge filled with people reading, playing board games, drinking coffee. Blake spotted a shelf. Oh no. What? Chess. You don't play chess. I absolutely do. You absolutely lose. We'll see. 30 minutes later. I hate this game. I couldn't stop laughing. You've lost 3 times. I've been strategically defeated. You walked your queen directly into danger. She was optimistic. She was sacrificed. I believe in bold leadership. You believe in chaos. I've learned from you. The older couple we met earlier walked past. The husband glanced at our board. Tough match? Blake sighed dramatically. I'm being emotionally destroyed. The man laughed. Happens in every relationship. He walked away before either of us responded. Blake looked at me. I'm not correcting anyone anymore. I noticed. I'm tired. I respect that. He leaned back in his chair. I think we've reached the point where explaining would take longer. Definitely. So. He picked up another chess piece. Your move. I studied the board. Then looked at him. You let me win that last game. His eyebrows lifted. No. You absolutely did. I absolutely didn't. You forgot your rook. I sacrificed my rook. You forgot. I strategically forgot. I smiled. You are terrible at lying. He smiled back. Only to you? For some reason. That sentence stayed with me. That evening was their final dinner before checkout. The restaurant overlooked the lake. Candles flickered on every table. Soft piano music drifted through the room. The hostess recognized them immediately. Welcome back. Thank you. She led them to the same window table as the night before. We've saved your favorite spot. Blake smiled politely. That's very kind. As soon as she left, he whispered. I think we're regulars now. We've been here 3 days. Still counts. Dinner was relaxed. Easy. Comfortable. Almost exactly like every meal they'd shared over the last several years. Except. Not exactly. Because every now and then. Jordan, that was me, would catch Blake looking at me. Not staring. Just. Looking. The moment I noticed. He'd glance away. Once. Twice. 3 times. Finally I smiled. What? He blinked. You keep looking at me. I do? A little. He looked genuinely surprised. He laughed awkwardly. I didn't realize. You've said that a lot this weekend. I have? Yeah. He rubbed his forehead. Maybe my brain's on vacation too. Maybe. He smiled. Sorry. You don't have to apologize. He held my gaze for a second. Okay. Neither of us spoke after that. Not because anything was wrong. Because somehow. The conversation suddenly felt bigger than either of us knew how to continue. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Inside, everything felt warm. Comfortable. Familiar. Almost exactly like home. Almost. Because somewhere between the mistaken honeymoon booking, the shared jokes, the long conversations, and all the quiet moments in between, something had shifted. Neither of us knew what it was yet. But for the first time since we'd met 4 years earlier, I found myself wondering a question I'd never even considered before. Not because anyone else thought we looked good together. Not because of the honeymoon suite. Not because strangers assumed things. But because, when I imagined this vacation ending, the thought of going back to pretending nothing had changed suddenly felt much harder than I expected. Checkout morning arrived much sooner than either of us expected. I woke to the sound of Blake quietly zipping his suitcase. For a second I just watched him. He moved around the room carefully, trying not to wake me, even though I was already awake. He caught me looking. Sorry. You weren't loud. You sure? Yeah. He smiled. Morning. Morning. Neither of us seemed particularly eager to leave. The room that had seemed so ridiculous 3 days earlier somehow felt familiar. The fireplace. The balcony. Even the ridiculous folded towel swans had become part of the joke we'd carried through the entire trip. Blake looked around once before closing his suitcase. I kind of don't want to go. I know. It went too fast. It always does. He nodded. I hate that. So do I. Breakfast was quieter than usual. Not awkward. Just thoughtful. Both of us seemed to realize vacation was ending, and with it the strange little bubble we'd been living inside. Back to work. Back to bills. Back to laundry. Back to normal. As we finished our coffee, Blake suddenly looked up. Hey. Yeah? When we get home. I waited. Let's not wait another year to do something together. I smiled immediately. Deal. I'm serious. So am I. No excuses. No excuses. He held out his fist. I bumped it. Deal. At reception, the same woman who had checked us and smiled the moment she saw us. Good morning. Morning. I hope everything was wonderful. Blake nodded. It really was. We're so happy to hear that. She looked down at her computer. Before you leave. She reached beneath the desk. A little souvenir. She handed us a small wooden picture frame engraved with the resort's logo. Inside, the concert photo. Professionally printed. Underneath it, a tiny engraved plate read, Blake and Jordan. Honeymoon escape. Blake stared. I stared. The receptionist smiled proudly. Our photographer said it was one of her favorite pictures this week. I looked at Blake. His ears had turned slightly pink. Thank you, he managed. We hope you'll visit again. We probably will. She beamed. We'd love that. As soon as we reached the parking lot, Blake looked at the frame again. They're never going to know. No. I almost feel bad. You've said that about everything. I know. He smiled. Can we keep it anyway? I looked at the picture. We both looked genuinely happy. Not posing. Not pretending. Just happy. Yeah. I like it. So do I. He carefully placed the frame on top of our bags where it wouldn't get damaged. The drive home started much quieter than the drive there. Not because anything was wrong. Because we were both tired. Comfortably tired. The kind that follows a really good trip. About an hour into the drive, Blake reached over and turned the music down. I've been thinking. That's dangerous. He smiled. I know. What about? He kept his eyes on the road. Remember what I asked you yesterday? When was the last time I was actually happy? Yeah. I remember. He nodded. I don't think I answered completely. You said right now. I did. A pause. But that wasn't the whole answer. I waited. The reason. He hesitated. Wasn't just the vacation. I turned toward him. It wasn't? He shook his head. No. Another long silence. Finally. I forgot how much I enjoy spending time with you. I smiled. We literally live together. I know. But living together isn't the same thing. He was right. Again. We got lazy. A little. We stopped making plans. We stopped asking questions. He nodded. I don't want that anymore. Neither do I. He smiled softly. Good. A couple of hours later, we stopped for coffee. Small roadside cafe. Almost empty. While Blake went to order, I stayed near the window. The waitress arrived with 2 mugs a few minutes later. She smiled at me. "You two make a cute couple." I opened my mouth automatically, ready to explain, then stopped. Because I suddenly realized something. I wasn't tired of correcting people. I simply didn't feel like explaining our entire friendship to every stranger we met. Blake returned carrying pastries. "What?" I smiled. "Nothing." She walked away. He sat down. "You have that face." "What face?" "The one that means you're thinking too much." "I probably am." He laughed. "You definitely are." Back in the car, rain began falling again. Soft. Steady. Blake drove while I watched the drops race across the windows. "Jordan?" "Can I ask one more weird question?" "Sure." "If we'd booked separate rooms," I looked over, "would this trip have felt different?" I answered honestly. "I think so." "Better?" "No." He glanced at me briefly. "Worse?" I thought about it. The shared jokes. Late night conversations. The blanket incident. Coffee on the balcony. Long silences that somehow never felt empty. "I think we'd have spent less time together." He nodded slowly. "I think so too." Neither of us spoke after that. The answer seemed enough. We reached home just before sunset. Our apartment looked exactly the same. Same hallway. Same mailbox. Same slightly squeaky front door. Everything exactly where we'd left it. Blake carried the suitcases inside. I followed with the smaller bags. The apartment felt strangely quiet. Almost smaller. He set the luggage down. "Home. Home." Neither of us moved immediately. Then Blake picked up the framed photograph. He looked around. "What?" I meant what I said. "About what?" "The fridge." I laughed. "You actually want to put it there?" "Why not? It literally says honeymoon." "So?" "So people will ask." He shrugged. "They ask questions anyway." I smiled. "Fair point." He walked into the kitchen. A minute later, I heard the familiar sound of a magnet clicking into place. When I joined him, the picture sat right in the middle of the refrigerator. 2 smiling idiots under string lights. A completely wrong caption. And somehow, it still felt like exactly the right memory. Blake stood beside me looking at it. Quietly. Then he smiled. "I don't think I'll ever regret booking the wrong room." I looked at the photograph. Then at him. Something inside me stirred again. Small. Confusing. Impossible to name. And judging by the thoughtful expression on Blake's face, I wasn't the only one feeling it. The first week after we got home felt normal. At least on the surface. Work started again. Meetings. Laundry. Groceries. The same routines we'd slipped back into 100 times before. Except now I kept noticing tiny differences. Not in the apartment. In us. Monday evening I walked into the kitchen to find Blake already making dinner. "You cooked?" He shrugged. "I got home early." "Smells good." "I attempted pasta." "Attempted?" "We'll find out together." I laughed. Somehow dinner lasted nearly 2 hours. Not because we were eating. Because we talked. Actually talked. About work. About the trip. About childhood stories we'd somehow never shared before. At one point Blake stopped mid-sentence. "What?" He smiled. "We're doing it again." "What?" "Talking." "I thought we always talked." He shook his head. "No." Then he smiled. "This is different." I knew exactly what he meant. A few days later Emma came over. The moment she stepped into the apartment her eyes landed on the refrigerator. She froze. "No." Blake sighed. "I forgot." She slowly walked closer. Read the engraved plate. Looked at us. then burst into laughter. You actually framed it? It was free, Blake defended himself. It says honeymoon. I can read. She looked at me. You allowed this? I encouraged it. I knew it. She shook her head dramatically. You two are unbelievable. Then something unexpected happened. She stopped smiling, looked at the photograph again, then quietly said, You both look really happy. The apartment became strangely quiet. Because she was right. Not vacation happy. Not fake smile happy. Just comfortable. Like we'd forgotten the camera existed. Emma looked between us. I haven't seen either of you smile like that in a long time. Neither of us answered. Because neither of us had realized it before. That weekend we decided to go for a walk. Not because we'd planned it. Because Blake looked away from his computer and suddenly said, Want to get coffee? Now? Yeah. Sure. It turned into coffee. Then a bookstore. Then sitting in the park for almost 3 hours talking about absolutely everything. On the walk home, Blake laughed quietly. You know what? What? This feels suspiciously like vacation. It kind of does. He smiled. Maybe we don't need mountains. What do you mean? Maybe. He looked ahead. We just needed to stop treating life like something we're trying to survive. That sounded exactly like Blake. Simple. Honest. Unexpectedly wise. The question I'd been avoiding finally caught up with me a few nights later. I couldn't sleep. Not because anything was wrong. Because I couldn't stop thinking. Eventually I walked onto the balcony. The city was quiet. A minute later the sliding door opened behind me. Blake stepped outside carrying 2 mugs. I guessed. You always do. He handed me one. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally he said, You've been thinking. I laughed softly. That obvious? To me. I looked over. Can I ask you something? Always. I took a slow breath. Do you think? The words felt strangely difficult. Something changed? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned against the railing beside me. I've been asking myself the same thing. You have? He nodded. Every day since we got back. I stared into my coffee. I can't tell if the trip changed something. Or if it just made us notice something that was already there. His answer surprised me. Because it was exactly what I'd been thinking. He looked toward the city lights. I kept trying to figure out why I didn't want vacation to end. I stayed quiet. Then he smiled. I finally realized it wasn't because of the mountains. I looked at him. It wasn't? He shook his head. It was because for 3 days. He laughed quietly. I got to spend all my time with my favorite person. Everything inside me went completely still. Blake looked almost embarrassed. I didn't mean that to sound dramatic. It didn't. I just... He rubbed the back of his neck. I miss you. I blinked. We live together. I know. But that's different. I know. I miss this. He gestured between us. Actually paying attention. Actually listening. Actually being together. The silence that followed felt different from every silence we'd ever shared. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Just important. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since the second night at the resort. What are we doing? Blake smiled. I was hoping you'd know. I don't. Neither do I. We both laughed. Then he became serious again. I don't want to pretend nothing happened. I don't either. I also don't want to ruin the best friendship I've ever had. My chest tightened. I've been afraid of exactly that. He nodded. I figured. Another long silence. Then Blake quietly said, What if? What? We don't rush to define it? I frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean. He searched for the words carefully. We already know we enjoy being together. We already trust each other. We already built a life that somehow works. He smiled. What if we just keep being honest? I looked at him for a long moment. That sounded exactly like Blake. No dramatic speeches. No impossible promises. Just honesty. I think. I smiled. I'd like that. He smiled back. Relief spread across his face. So. We keep going? We keep going. He laughed quietly. I can do that. So can I. Months later, people still asked about the photograph on our refrigerator. Sometimes friends laughed. Sometimes they teased us. Emma still called it the world's most expensive booking mistake. We never took it down. Not because of the honeymoon joke. Because every time I looked at it, I remembered something much more important. Two exhausted friends who finally slowed down long enough to notice what had quietly become the most important part of both their lives. It wasn't one conversation that changed everything. Or one perfect moment. It was dozens of tiny ones. Morning coffee. Long walks. Shared routines. Late-night conversations. A ridiculous honeymoon suite neither of us was supposed to book. Looking back, maybe the receptionist had been wrong. It wasn't the beginning of our love story. It was simply the weekend that finally made us realize we'd already been writing it for years. And somehow, the best part wasn't the mistaken reservation. It was that when we finally got home, neither of us wanted to go back to living the way we had before. Because sometimes the biggest changes don't happen all at once. Sometimes they begin with one wrong click on a booking website. And end with two best friends finally seeing each other a little more clearly than they ever had before.